Of course, Brexit did not happen immediately after the Brexit referendum in 2016. There were exhausting negotiations between the UK and the EU, first about the exit of the UK and then about the future relationship between the EU and the UK. After the official Brexit on January 31st in 2020, where the UK officially left the EU and with it the Parliament, there was a transitional period until December 31st in 2020 to implement the new relationship, and they needed negotiations close to that. But there are some longer transitional periods for some areas, but this was the main one. And people are talking a lot about the level of preparations for Brexit on the different sides, or just the lack of. So in a few of my videos, I give you an overview about the extent of preparations by different countries involved. And of course, I already did the UK and I will also do the EU. And today I will tell you about the preparations in France. Before the end of the Brexit transition period on December 31st in 2020, France, like other European Union member states, made extensive preparations to mitigate the potential impacts of the United Kingdom's departure from the EU. France invested significant resources in preparing its customs and border infrastructure to handle the increased trade and movement of goods between the EU and the UK. Measures were implemented to ensure efficient border checks, including the recruitment and training of additional custom officers. That doesn't mean that they remove the checks, so it takes time still. France worked on adapting its regulatory framework to accommodate the changes resulting from Brexit as well. And this involved reviewing laws and regulations, particularly in areas such as trade, agriculture, fisheries, and financial services, to ensure they were suitable for the post-Brexit environment. And France placed a strong emphasis on maintaining and developing its trade and economic relations with the UK. The French government engaged in the negotiations with the UK to establish a new trade agreement with the EU that would govern their future relationship. Discussions focused on areas such as tariffs, quotas, and regulatory cooperation. But France also provided support and guidance to businesses that would be affected by Brexit. This included information campaigns, workshops, and assistance in understanding the potential impacts and necessary adjustments to comply with new customs and regulatory requirements. Given the importance of transport links between France and the UK, steps were taken already to ensure the continuity and smooth flow of goods and people. Additional resources were allocated to ports such as Calais and Dunkirk to handle the increased customs checks and to avoid congestion. France sought to safeguard the rights of UK citizens living in France and vice versa. Measures were put in place to allow UK citizens residing in France to secure their resident status and access essential services post-Brexit. France actively collaborated with other EU member states and institutions to coordinate Brexit preparations. This included sharing information, best practices, and lessons learned to ensure a harmonized approach across the EU. And of course, fisheries were a crucial aspect of the negotiations between the EU and the UK. As a coastal nation with a significant fishing industry, France placed a particular focus on protecting its fishing rights in UK waters. The French government worked closely with the EU to negotiate a fair and sustainable agreement on fisheries that would safeguard the interests of French fishermen. France, being home to Paris, one of Europe's major financial centers, also took steps to attract financial institutions and businesses relocating from the UK. The French government introduced measures to enhance the competitiveness of Paris as a financial hub, including regulatory reforms and incentives to facilitate the relocation of financial services firms. And France, as a key EU member state, played a crucial role in ensuring continued security cooperation with the UK post-Brexit. Both countries worked to establish new arrangements to maintain collaboration in areas such as counter-terrorism, intelligence sharing, and defense capabilities. And France made preparations to address potential disruptions in the supply of medicines and medical devices due to Brexit. The government implemented measures to ensure the continued flow of essential healthcare products, including the establishment of additional regulatory procedures and cooperation with pharmaceutical companies. With the UK becoming a third country outside the EU's data protection framework, France and other EU member states had to adapt their data transfer mechanisms. The French government ensured that appropriate safeguards were in place to facilitate the lawful transfer of personal data between France and the UK. And France launched public awareness campaigns to inform citizens, but also businesses and relevant stakeholders about the potential impacts of Brexit. Websites, hotlines, and information centers were set up to provide guidance and answer questions regarding the necessary actions to be taken in various sectors. In case of a no-deal Brexit, France, along with other EU member states, developed contingency plans to mitigate the most immediate and severe consequences. These plans included measures to address potential disruptions in various areas, such as transport, trade, customs, and border controls. Before the end of the transition period on December 31st in 2020, Brexit preparations were considered highly important for all affected countries, both within the European Union and the United Kingdom. The transition period began after the UK officially left the EU on January 31st in 2020, and it allowed time for both parties to negotiate their future relationship and, of course, make necessary arrangements. The impact of Brexit was felt across various sectors, including trade, customs, immigration, finance, and regulations. Both the UK and EU member states had to make significant preparations to ensure a smooth transition and minimize disruptions, and they did it more or less successfully. And these preparations involved a wide range of activities, such as legal and regulatory changes, infrastructure upgrades, and communication campaigns, if they did it. The level of preparedness varied across countries depending on their specific interests and the scale of their economic ties with the UK. Some countries with significant trade relations, such as Ireland and the Netherlands, placed particular emphasis on Brexit preparations. I make videos on them as well, don't worry. They implemented measures to mitigate potential disruptions and safeguard their economies. Overall, the importance of Brexit preparations cannot be understated. Both the UK and EU member states needed to be well prepared to minimize disruptions to trade, regulatory alignment, and other aspects of their relationship. The transition period provided an opportunity to make these necessary adjustments and to ensure a smoother post-Brexit environment. But in these videos, that's why I'm making this, you see that some did more and some did not so much to prepare for it. But if you want to know more about Brexit, about another country in this topic, for example, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.